Welcome back to the Secure Connections podcast, a weekly series brought to you by IOTSA, the Internet of Things Security Services Association. I'm your host, Brian Sherman, Content Director for IOTSA, and in today's episode, I have the privilege of speaking with one of the friendliest and most knowledgeable people in the channel who also knows a thing or two about cybersecurity. Eric Pinto, Senior Director of Channel for SOCSoter, has more than a decade of industry experience helping MSPs and IT service providers deliver innovative and highly profitable solutions to the SMB. Good day and welcome to the Secure Connections podcast, Eric.
Hey, it's good to be with you.
Good to be with you. How is the weather down in Dallas today?
The weather in Dallas is fantastic, actually. We have not had really much of a winter at all, which is awesome.
Cool. Well, we haven't either, and I'm between Buffalo and Cleveland, so that's not a bad thing this time of year. Cool. And we will, the IOTSA team will be coming down to, not to Dallas, but to Houston here very shortly. So we're looking forward to a little Texas hospitality and hopefully warmer weather too.
I look forward to joining you there. Yes.
Good. So Eric, this is your first time, I believe, I could be wrong, as a guest on the Secure Connections podcast. Can you tell our listeners a little about yourself? Maybe we start off with where did you grow up?
I grew up here in the Dallas area, went to school here, and then moved off to college in Boston, went to Boston College and lived up in Boston for a few years after that.
That's got to be a little culture shock, huh? Going Dallas, Boston, back to Dallas, but
Yeah, it was. My parents are from New York, from Brooklyn and Queens. So the idea of getting out of Texas was really something that was cemented in me early. They wanted me to see more of the U.S. So I didn't want to go directly to New York because I have a lot of cousins there. I thought I'd maybe get myself into a little trouble. So went to Boston College, which I think was the best choice for me and allowed me to really grow and learn in a much different area and climate than Dallas.
Very good. So I have to ask though, are you a Patriots fan or a Dallas fan or neither?
I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. I don't care what we do. I don't care what the season looks like. I will be a Dallas Cowboys fan. I'll take all the hate right now.
Hey, I'm a Buffalo Bills fan, so hey, it's been a long time for us. So at least you guys have got a few over on us too. So that it is what it is. But let's talk about career. How did you get your start in the channel?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. The channel was kind of foreign to me. I first started working just after college in the tech space. I came to a DSL company back when that was hot in like 99, 2000, 2001, and was working with those services. Moved back here to Dallas, and I partnered with someone here. And we were deploying security services, email filtering, those types of services to a lot of customers nationwide, mostly end customer businesses. And then we started realizing that we had these partners that were coming to us and they would bring us not one deal, but 5 deals or 10 deals, and they were growing out their own businesses. And I hadn't really clued into what the whole channel thing was at that point. But very quickly we became acquired, and once we were acquired, I moved over with the business, and the new company was Channel Focus. And I realized that I've been chasing for 5 years. I've been chasing these end customer locations nationwide and trying to, explain our product set and really try to, get them on board. I realized that I was always sort of second man in to a managed service provider that really understood the relationship and had the boots on the ground. So selling through that model really makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that I've kept to it.
Well, good. Now, and you've landed over the last couple of years at SOCSoter and working the channel program there. Can you give the audience a brief overview of what you all do?
Yeah, great. Yeah, SOCSoter, we're a channel-focused, channel-only security and compliance organization. I came on board about a year ago, and my focus really is in helping us as a company to democratize compliance for small business, right? So if you look at the compliance space as a whole, or security space as a whole, it's been very difficult to get sort of the enterprise level tools in place in a business that is sub 100 and certainly sub 50 employees. We've really worked to sort of crack the code in that space, to not take any shortcuts in deploying network grade security tools into the sub 50 or sub 50 user space. And we do scale up. So we've got tons of clients that are 100 users or even 1,000 users. But in that small business space, I think we really have cracked the code.
Great. So what are your responsibilities? I know I'd mentioned channel, but that's pretty broad. What do you do on a daily basis?
Not to make it even more broad, but yeah, I have a title of channel and product strategy. So everything from coming in and looking at the business model as it was a year ago, to expanding that out to really create products or packages that are resonating with small business, to really to help them to get to a point where they can look at the requirement or need to deploy strong security and compliance tools and not be so controlled by the budget, right? Where they're forced to say, hey, well, that's great, but we can't spend $1,000 a month or $10,000 a month, whatever it would be for the enterprise tool. So I've really helped the company to shift the model so that we're really squarely focused in that small and mid-sized space and providing a tool set that has resonated with that community.
That's fantastic. And I know, Eric, you have extensive background in the channel, as we referred to before, including stints in the technology fields outside of cybersecurity. Based on your broad experience, how does cybersecurity rank in an MSP's toolkit today? Do you feel like I do that the urgency and value proposition for data protection skills has changed over the past 3 to 5 years, has really scaled up?
It's definitely scaled up. You say 3 to 5 years. I mean, if I take a step back and show all of our ages here, we've been focused in cyber and in security most broadly for a dozen years or more. And we've been saying things like HIPAA, for all of that time, and it's really been ignored. Right. I mean, if you go into most, sub 50 user organizations, you start talking to them about even best practice. Over the course of that sort of 5-year and beyond period, it really was ignored. What we're seeing now, and I would say not even 3 to 5, in the past 2 years, is an explosion now where it's the option is sort of off the table. The end customer businesses are starting to realize that they need to move towards security and compliance. They're really looking around to see what their peers are doing in the space. They are affected by what they're seeing, not maybe in the news, right? I mean, everyone looks to Sony and Target and these sort of large scale breaches, but more in the peer space or in the local space, when you see, a local company that was impacted in some way or another, I think it resonates more, and we're seeing more of that, and that's driving businesses to ask more questions. What's interesting though is that the end customers are now asking the questions, and the partners may find themselves, ill prepared to answer them, and that's some of the gap that we're looking to cover.
That makes perfect sense too. I like your point about it's end user driven, which is, not just the things I see in the news, but when your neighbor or your neighboring business, peer business gets whacked, you hear about that. You're in a chamber of commerce meeting and you hear all the horrors of things going on. That's probably driving it. But I know we've always had that cybersecurity skills back there, but the doom and gloom from some of the people saying as the cloud comes in, MSP's role is going to be smaller and they're not going to be needed. It's like all of a sudden the light went on with cybersecurity. This is a huge option. I think when we talk about it, you're right. Probably the past 2 years, all of a sudden it is carved out a very good value proposition for MSPs to go into cybersecurity. But obviously all of them aren't capable of scaling up and providing the services like things like SOCSoter provides to help fill in, I won't say the gaps, but help complement and add the services that don't make sense for them to offer themselves.
Mm-hmm.
So what areas of cybersecurity do you think MSPs should be focusing more on in 2020, now that we've talked about the past couple of years? Looking forward, where should they be putting their cybersecurity eggs, so be it?
Well, if we take that step back again and say, okay, what are we deploying today, right? What is generally deployed in the sub 50 user environment, sub 100 user environment? It's going to be a baseline of endpoint protection, right? So some level of antivirus, some level of anti-malware, maybe some of the other detection response solutions on the endpoints. So you're seeing a lot of that, right? Detection response on the endpoint being sort of a big area right now. The other area is, the next generation firewalls, right? So making sure that firewall environment, that front line or that perimeter is also protected, right? So those are the two things from a deployment standpoint that we see, real interest in at the service provider level. Along with, sort of the ancillary things like checking the dark web to make sure that, those things that, aren't out there and passwords aren't floating around and stuff like that. But those two core components on the endpoint and on the firewall are still really the focus areas. What we're seeing the demand shift is now in doing more or having more visibility over the network. And what that typically leads to is some level of monitoring the network active. Right, and that's a core service that we provide here at SOCSoter, but it's also a demand area that we're seeing on the rise. Again, from those end customer organizations, where it's not only can you put these point solutions in place and set them up and create a profile to thwart or block out malicious traffic or alert me to certain things, but it's also can you monitor maybe all the traffic in real time, so that I know if something comes in through maybe a protected endpoint like a desktop or server, or through a third party or IoT device. If you look at today's networks, you go into any small business, there's probably more unprotected assets on the network than protected. What do I mean? You've got desktops and servers, but then you've got the conference room has a cool new system that they've deployed. Behind you, I can see an internet connected telephone, right? So there's all these different things that are on the network. The thermostat, the fish tank, the refrigerator are all connected these days, and these all become points of compromise, right? So we really take 10 steps back and we look at the entire network, every connected device, and monitor the traffic from all of it. And that's a differentiator for us in the space, but it's also, if you look at what the enterprise has been doing, that's what we're also now bringing down into the mid-market.
Very cool. Now, if you haven't been listening to the podcast, a couple of weeks ago, I had somebody talking about an internet-connected toaster. Mm-hmm. So it would get the latest weather forecast, and it would put, sun up or sun. That's still my favorite IoT connected device.
It's crazy, but if you think about if you were selling if you're selling refrigerators today or toasters today, and I looked at this because I bought my house about 10 years ago. My refrigerator. If there really is no difference between my stainless steel Samsung refrigerator and the one that I see at the store today, other than the one at the store today has a huge tablet screen on it that tells you the weather, that tells you, that you're out of milk and all this other stuff. And they've found that by adding that internet component to these devices, they can make them more saleable, I think, in a modern market, right? So do I need to go to the refrigerator to tell me what the weather is? No, I could probably say, and I won't say it now because it'll respond, but I could, ALEXA, and I could get that weather as quickly, right? Yeah. But all of these devices you're now seeing not only in the home, but certainly in the office as well, because if it's cool and whiz-bang at home, that business owner is going to say, hey, let's install that same toaster here in the office because I love it at home. Yeah.
Well, to your point, there's a lot of moving parts when it comes to cybersecurity today. It's not just a matter of the technology; it's the compliance. It's looking at regulations. It's proactively monitoring. I mean, I could go on that whole list, which I'd rather have you do than me do. But with all of that, and I know I've heard this discussion before, even from your team, is do MSPs need a designated chief security officer or chief information security officer today? And if so, what responsibility should they take on inside the firm, as well as internally and externally?
Yeah. So do they? I'll take maybe the lesser traveled approach here and say no. I don't necessarily think that every service provider in the country or globally needs a chief information security officer. I think that doesn't scale well, right? If you're a 5-man shop, and there's plenty of very successful 5 and 10-man shops out there that are doing a great job in securing their customers. Would your 6th hire be a CISO? Probably not, right? Like that doesn't really work at scale, right? So I think that what I challenge partners to do though is if they are a 5 or a 10-man organization and they've maybe had their head in the sand for a couple of years now, and if my first question to them is, hey, what are you guys doing on the compliance landscape, and the only answer is HIPAA, then we probably need to start talking about some deeper education, re-education around where the concerns are, where the threats are today. I think that would be a good idea. But do they need to hire a CISO to get there? No, I think that there's plenty of information around, plenty of resource around for them to step their game up as an organization, and then partnering. I think partnering is a wise choice for many, if not most, organizations to get that coverage in areas where you may not have it.
That makes sense. Now, much of the emphasis for cybersecurity is on the design, or has been on the design and implementation of systems in the past, while auditing and testing have seemed to be more of an afterthought, especially in the tech conversations. What should MSPs be doing to increase attention on what seems like these vital practices?
Yeah, so you have to do both. You can't just design it, a thing and then not test it. That doesn't, if you take those steps back and say, okay, what are we doing and where's our focus? You can't just say, well, we're gonna design this sweet, totally secure environment and then never assess or test it. That's sort of ridiculous when you say it out loud, right? So I think that there has to be emphasis on design and architecture, right? I think it makes sense whether you're going in green and you're building something new, or if you're coming in and re-architecting an environment that's been around. I think having a game plan, right, which is what that design and architecture would give you, I think having that game plan is really important. But then I think equally important is ongoing assessment for vulnerability, looking for cracks in the system, and making sure that you've got protective measures in place, or at least awareness to know that, hey, this is where I'm vulnerable, this is where I'm weak. We deal a lot with manufacturing, and many times that the entire business is built on some legacy old server that's running a key or critical device in their shop, and they can't afford to change it out and get the new version, or maybe the new version doesn't exist, but the one that's there works great. So it's creating awareness over, well, that server is out of date, it is out of spec completely. You really do need to replace it. But if you're not going to do that, then let's create some awareness around that device, some monitoring of what's impacting that device, and then so that if it were to be compromised, that we could be alerted in real time.
Yeah. Those are the conversations, I think, too, where some of the MSPs struggle with their clients to say, well, I'm going to price out the system, but we also need to have these ongoing services. And that's where they, I won't say stumble, but that's sometimes where they have the hardest time convincing their clients, because they're like, well, if you put a system in, it should work. We shouldn't have to do that.
Yeah, but I just actually got off the phone with someone, and they came to me and they wanted to talk about pen testing and doing stuff like that. And while I absolutely would love to do the pen test work with them, the reality is if I check, or if I do a pen test today on the network, and we scan everything and we determine what the vulnerabilities are and where the issues are and everything else that's wrapped into that deep dive test of the systems. And let's say we scan it today, I give you a report, you lock it down next week. There is nothing to say that the week after you're still not going to be impacted. That the week after you've done your deep dive analysis and assessment, that someone's going to come in, and even though you gave them the training and awareness, they still click on the thing, or they bring the USB key and they introduce the malicious code into the network, and now you're impacted, right? So having an ongoing strategy is key. It is key. So however you're defining that to your end customer, it needs to start with an ongoing strategy. So you're going to put protective measures in place, tools in place, to secure the environment, but an ongoing strategy of awareness, so we know what's happening in real time at any time.
And I think that's one of the areas with an MSSP like yourself that it's a big value too, because you need that third party, somebody outside of the MSP's realm and the end user's realm to kind of look in it as a neutral, maybe not necessarily neutral, but a different party assessing how each of them are interacting and each of the systems is working. Is that where you find your team working quite a bit on doing those type of tests?
Yeah, that's where we started. So when we started out five and a half years ago, SOCSoter, we really were sort of squarely in that MSSP space where we would deploy our platform, our tool set, our SOC SIM monitoring, the monitoring environment. We would then alert the partner, the MSP, when we saw something, and we would work with them directly, to work through remediation. That's really largely where we started. We still provide those services, but we've really worked to now provide a platform that the partner can access themselves, where they can get in, they can go into a portal, they can really dig deeper into the emerging or immediate concern. They can start to answer a lot of the questions themselves without having to directly engage my team. And again, that allows us to really just perform at scale. So we're then able to cover more devices across the nation, now across the globe, and just be a resource to the partner.
Awesome. So you got more collaboration options now than in the past.
Absolutely. So we've launched a new partner portal that allows you to see all of your devices in real time and start managing those devices. You can now manage endpoints from the portal and really just self-service for our partner. But that doesn't mean that we're still not there to assist. We probably do an equal amount of incident response and forensics and other sort of direct, project or MSSP work on behalf of our partners as well.
Very cool. Good. And I've had an opportunity over the last couple of years in particular to do deep dive with some MSPs about their cybersecurity concerns. And it seems like some of their most difficult discussions, other than closing new sales, which is always a challenge, involves incident response. Yep. In an industry built on making improvements and having success, they appear somewhat uncomfortable talking about the failure point. And I can understand that part, is you don't want to talk about failure, but the reality is it happens. And it's an area where they need the most help. How should partners approach the incident response discussion and remediation as well with their SMB clients, Eric?
Well, not to be contradictory, but the real reason why they don't want to address it many times, it's not only this idea of failure, because any organization can be breached, and I think that's got to be said up front, right? Again, I said this earlier. No matter what we deploy out there, something could happen that allows access into one machine or several machines on the network or an entire network at any given time. That it's always a possibility. You can look to the big guys, Sony, Target, and Home Depot and others, to say they were the guys doing it all right, and they were still in one way or another impacted, right? So this idea of I failed because my client was breached. I don't really think that's the issue. I think that it really comes down to maybe the failure combined with this maybe not knowing why something happened, or not even having an idea where to start on incident response, right? So, hey, we get the call all the time. Customer X was impacted in one way or another. What do we do, right? And this is these are knowledgeable groups that are really good in what they do in terms of serving their client, building out systems, supporting systems. But when it comes to a breach or an incident on the network, there's some sort of hand-tied and don't know what to do. And I think that's really the fear is not the failure itself, but not knowing what next steps to take. I think that is the biggest fear.
Yeah. And I would say even with ransomware and with phishing schemes, if you think about it, more often than not, these schemes aren't anything an MSP can necessarily stop. It's more up to the end users who fail. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that can go wrong from the person at the computer terminal to the MSP to there's a lot of options. So it's
the real question that the partner has to, if in that moment of self-reflection, maybe they don't share this with their client, but did they deploy that right mix of solutions, right? And again, maybe the solutions weren't perfect, but if I'm impacted today, do I have access to logs? Do I have access to detailed data? Do I have access to things that will help me forensically, unpack the total scope here, right? So is it one machine that got ransomware on it and it's just siloed to that one machine, or is it the entire network, or do I not know? And if I don't know, then my responsibility to my end client is I have to tell them that we don't know the level of impact. Therefore, you have to announce that potentially all was impacted. Right. You may have gotten this from your credit card company where it says your social security number or your credit card number may have been involved in. It's because they don't know. They're not able to pinpoint and say whether your data was impacted in that breach. So they had to announce broadly to everyone. Well, when you're Equifax and TransUnion, it doesn't matter so much, right? Like they're global companies, they'll bounce back. But if you're a financial planner in Manhattan and you've got 100 key clients, and now you have to send a letter out to all 100 clients and say, I don't know if your stuff was breached or not. That's impactful to the business.
Makes sense.
Directly impactful to the economics of that business.
So Eric, to that point, what does your team do to help MSPs with the incident response? What types of services do you offer?
Yeah, so a couple of different ways that we help. Obviously, if we're already deployed on the network, the fact that we offer continuous monitoring, so we're continuously monitoring all devices on any given network and also logs on that network. So if we're already on the network, it's a lot easier for us, right? Because we already have access to those logs. We can already start digging into it from the moment of the phone call to us. We can start digging into it and saying, okay, this is what we see. This is, we see that this device was impacted at this time. And what we're hoping to be able to do is to correlate via the logs and the data. We're hoping to be able to correlate to say, this device was impacted at 12:30. We discovered it at 1:15. You shut the network down at 1:45. We can say concretely that this device that had X amount of data on it didn't have any ability to communicate to anywhere else in that 45-minute or hour and a half period, right? So that's where we're hoping to be able to silo, right? To be able to say, it was this device or these 5 devices or this part of the network as opposed to all. But from an incident response standpoint, we do it all. So we'll go in, whether we do it virtually or whether we send boots on the ground. We will go in, we will pull all the logs, we will look at all the data forensically, and really work to determine the overall scope and the impact. Incident response is an interesting area. If you guys don't know, it is quickly on the compliance path going to a 3-day or 72-hour response requirement. So that means you need to be able to produce at least an initial report within 72 hours. That's incredibly quick.
Yeah. Very good. Well, you mentioned compliance. How big of a factor is compliance today? And with the expanding list of government rules and industry standards, what challenge does that present to MSPs today?
I think it comes down to that education piece, right? So compliance has been the driving force. If we look at the past year to 2 years and this really ramped focus towards cybersecurity, it's the majority of it. I think it's been driven by, at least here in the U.S., by compliance, right? So we're seeing this push towards the responsibility being on the end business, right? So that used to be, if you look at DoD compliance, you would see it with the primes, right? So you would see it with Raytheon and these other sort of large companies, right? And they would have to secure their environment, and then when they start working down the supply chain, they would just sort of ask very baseline questions of their supplier. In the past 2 years, we've now seen that baseline of questions expanded from 10 super broad questions to 100 very specific questions. And in the past year, we've seen that most directly, just be, hey, we need you to be, NIST 800-171 compliant. Now, if you go to a manufacturing shop with 35 or 40 employees, and whose core business is not technology, nor the technology that they've got in their shop, and tell them they have to be NIST 800-171 compliant, they don't even know where to start, right? So they go to their MSP. The MSP then needs to be at least knowledgeable enough on what the core tenets of that compliance area are, right? So if you boil all of these compliances, whether it's NIST 800, the new CMMC, which is the new framework for NIST that's coming out in DoD, if you look at ISO 701, FINRA, SEC, all of these compliance areas will boil down to the same commonalities, the same core focus areas, which is active monitoring of the network, vulnerability detection or assessment, a broad level gap analysis of what's going on in the physical and network environment, and then having those things in place, and then the ability to respond to an incident in real time. Those are sort of the four sort of core components of all of these compliance areas. If you take a step back and say, okay, well, what are partners normally deploying? It's just firewall and endpoint. That doesn't get you there at all on any of those areas, right? So the best practice of what they've deployed and what's being asked of the end customer business, there's a disconnect, right? So again, we help to close that gap by providing a tool set that will infill those capabilities.
Very good. Give them all the comprehensive set of tools that they need to protect their clients then.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, unfortunately, this is the point where I realize our time is quickly running out in the episode. What words of wisdom would you like to leave with our listeners today, Eric?
To be honest, I think it's, and again, not to be contradictory, but you have to forget budget for a moment. And I know I'll catch some hate on this, but the reality is take a step away from the budget conversation and have a real conversation with your end client. Have a real conversation about the type of data that they're managing, that they're maintaining, that they're transacting, that data that's being stored, and that data in motion. If that data is potentially sensitive, whether it's their own sensitive data, or even more importantly, if it's another individual sensitive data and you're responsible for it, you as an end customer, as an end business, are then a steward for that data. The responsibility is then yours to secure it, right? So you have to have that conversation first, right? And take it away from budget. The reason why I say take it away from budget is because there are a lot of opportunities now. There are a lot of opportunities now, and not just SOCSoter. There are a lot of opportunities now in the channel space that will give you the coverage that you need, that will give you the access to the tools that you need. And they may not be the ones that come top of mind. So look around, but you need to make sure that the tool is actually giving you what it says it's going to give you, right? So it's not just smoke and mirrors, and that you deploy it accurately. So I would say partner up, go phone a friend, and really work to make sure that you've got the right stuff deployed. So the second thing that I think you would want to do is be willing to reevaluate your own model, right? So as a partner, if you've gone to your customers, and let's say you've had a customer and you've had them for 10 years, you've been securing them for 10 years, you've been telling them they're all set for 10 years, and then all of a sudden you hit them with, tens of thousands of dollars of changes that need to be made, there may be some self-reflection that's required there too, to say, hey, let me take a step back on what I'm promising to my end client, and what their expectations are based on what I'm offering. Right, so I think that we're in a moment now where partners are really starting to reevaluate what their core, their all-inclusive model really is, and then they're saying, okay, maybe we need a core model, and then we need a cybersecurity model that's a step up from that. And we're seeing successful MSPs deploy that next level offering today.
Makes perfect sense. Got to scale up on the cybersecurity side as well. So thank you for your insight on that. So on behalf of IOTSA, I'd like to thank Eric Pinto of SOCSoter for joining us today and sharing his thoughts on cybersecurity and other issues too within the channel. If you haven't had an opportunity to check out our 2020 Cybersecurity Expo schedule and sign up for an event near you yet, be sure to check it out on our website. It's iotssa.com. Be sure as well to stop back soon for the next episode of the Secure Connections podcast. Thank you all and have a great day.
Thank you.